Welcome to Scoolinary, the online cooking school that transforms people and connects cultures. You will learn with the best chefs in the industry, and you will discover the broadest online catalog of topics related to gastronomy. We publish new courses every week. In our podcast, we have coffee with a chef every week. Each of them will tell us about their experience and their vision for the culinary world to help you better understand this exciting industry. Come on, join us for coffee. So today we are joined by Laura Meyer, three-time world pizza champion and the entrepreneur behind Pizzeria de Laura in Berkeley, California. Fluent in Italian, she speaks the language of pizza, but her talents have transcended tradition to make her one of the most celebrated pizzaiolas in the world. Hi, Laura. Welcome, and thanks for joining us for coffee.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, are you a coffee drinker?
Oh, yes.
And how do you take your coffee?
Normally, I drink a double espresso, no sugar, no nothing, just that. I'm normally a pretty quick and easy.
Yeah, that is a nice. I like, yeah, those small, short, quick jolts are pretty efficient as well, right?
Yeah, I'm normally just someone who doesn't like to sit still for really long periods of time, and I'm a slow drinker, so espresso does the trick.
So, if you would please tell us in your own words who you are and where you're from. That's so that our listeners can have a chance to get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm Laura Meyer. I'm the owner and operator of Pizzeria de Laura in Berkeley, California, which is the Bay Area of California, so right across from San Francisco. And I've been in pizza pretty much my whole life. It's been a wild ride. I've a three-time world champion, but I've done so many other things, and yeah, pizza's kind of my life.
Yeah, and you seem to have done pretty well at that. But let's get started where you started. You started making pizza when you were 16 years old. Were you making it at home or in a professional kitchen then?
It was actually my very first job. So I was told pretty much when I was 16, 17 years old by my brothers who were then in the military to go get a job. And it was just right around that time when as teenagers it was time for me to get a job and have something else to do besides school and sports. So I went and got a job, and it was at my local pizzeria with one of my good friends at the time because she was already working there, and the rest is history.
Yeah. What kind of pizza did you serve there?
I wouldn't classify it as any one particular style. I mean, if you had to, the way that it looked, I would say it's closest to that New York style, purely because it was just a classic round pizza. It wasn't anything too specific at the time, and that's where I had met my mentor. His brother was the owner of the restaurant, and so that's kind of where he got his feet wet with pizza, and that's where he started everything. And so the pizza definitely evolved while I was there because he was learning more about pizza. And then, but it was definitely like a classic round pie. It wasn't, I wouldn't classify it as anything specific.
So, since that time, when did you know that you were really good at pizza making?
Honestly, it took a while. Even after the first time I won, it was okay, now I need to do it again just to make sure that it wasn't a fluke. And so it actually took a really long time for me to really sit down and think, like, oh, I'm actually really good at this. And it's not something that I think about very often. I don't sit around thinking, patting myself on the back. But it wasn't something that I actively thought about, like, oh, am I good at this? Do I need outward validation? That kind of a thing. It was, I knew I was good at it because my mentor had put me in a position of leadership, and it meant that I had to be good at it, if not good at other things besides just making pizza. So that those were all kind of the little things that validated me over time. And then of course now I'm not just good at making pizza, even though there are a lot of critics out there and there's a lot of opinions and everyone is entitled to their opinion, even though sometimes it hurts.
Sure.
But I'm good at what I do, and I'm very much capable of being able to say that these days.
Right, and you have three world titles to back that up. Uh, as I mentioned in the intro, you are three-time world pizza champion. And I want to know if you could take us back to that first championship win and tell us about it.
Yeah, the first championship was in Parma, Italy, so in the northern part of Italy, and that was 2013. So, oh my God, 11 years ago now. And it was the first time I had ever competed internationally, and it was the second time I had ever competed, period. And I didn't really know what I was walking into. I had no idea what I was getting involved in. I had seen it before, but things changed because they changed the town that the competition was being held in. So things looked different. And not to mention, no one spoke English. And so it was just a very intimidating thing to do. But at the same time, the beauty of not being in a place where people speak your language is it's really easy to kind of just zone out and focus on what's in front of you. And so I had entered one category at the time. I was there to make one pizza, and it happened to be the winner. And it was it was very unexpected, pretty much by everybody. I don't think anybody in their right mind had any clue who I was or anything. So it was a huge surprise for sure.
So, can you tell us a little bit about that pizza?
Yeah, it was the pan style category. So I made what we call like a Sicilian style pizza. So a thicker, something that you would find in old school bakeries. For us here in the States, we call it a focaccia like dough. So thick and fluffy, but it's got a little bit of a crisp to it. And then on top, I just stuck with traditional flavors. I didn't go too far outside of the box. So I use soppressata, which is a spicy salami, something that comes from the south of Italy. And then I just paired it with arugula, prosciutto di Parma, some Parmigiano Reggiano. And for that specific pizza, I had blended a couple cheeses together, like provola and mozzarella. And I think there was one other cheese in there. But that was purely out of circumstance. It wasn't entirely intentional, just because I
Wow.
wasn't I wasn't as prepared as I should have been, apparently, according to Tony. But at the same time, no one really prepared me outside of bring the stuff you need to make the pizza, like the pan, your flour, obviously, and bring your tomatoes, and that was it. So I didn't bring any cheese with me, and I didn't think about it, and because I figured I'm going to Italy, I can just buy it there, right? Well, not necessarily. So I ended up having to blend a bunch of stuff together, but it won.
Oh my gosh, what a story. And if I'm correct, that pizza lives on your restaurant menu to this day. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, and it's on Tony's menu as well in San Francisco. So everyone knows about La Regina.
That's incredible. So, what do you think? Was there anything specific, do you think, that won the judges over?
I think at that time it was just, a little bit of everything. The dough was well executed, the dough was well fermented. The toppings were flavorful but not overpowering, and you could just you had it all. And I think it was just the perfect balance on that day compared to everybody else. And a lot of times in competition, people take it as an opportunity to go over the top, because you don't necessarily always go over the top on your menus, because it tends to get really expensive. And if people don't buy it, then it doesn't turn, and it wastes ingredients. And so sometimes you go a little bit more extravagant in competition. And I think some people take that to an extreme, and it just becomes too much or too overwhelming or too one note. And so I think it was just a clean, classic, well executed pizza.
Clearly, because it still exists and is around and on menus today.
Yeah, and people love it.
Yeah. So, what were some of the reactions, if there were any, to an American woman winning a pizza competition in the birthplace of pizza in Italy?
Yeah, it was an interesting experience. One I'll definitely never forget. I was with a small group of Americans, and so there was one other American that I was with that was actively competing, and then there was just a group that had come with us. And so at the end of every competition, there's an awards dinner, and it's a chance for everyone to sit down, to eat together, to talk, and just have a good time after the stress of competition. And it's also a time when the judges cook for you. So
Oh,
it's like a mini party, but at the same time, it's the awards presentation as well. So you eat, you drink, and then they do the awards presentation. And the awards presentation is long, very long. And it can be a little drawn out, but it's also nice because they recognize everybody who needs to be recognized. And so when they go through the categories, first they do an award for the top placement out of every country present, which is actually really nice to be able to recognize people coming from all over the world to do this. And so usually there's anywhere between 20 and 25 different countries present, which is really cool to see because you don't really think about it while you're doing it,
yeah.
how extensive and how wide the reach of pizza really is. And so it's just nice to see how many people from all over the world are there. But they do this award, and I had first won that award, and it was an inclination of, okay, you scored really well for the Americans, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you won anything. So it was nice to get up on stage and be able to get recognized. And of course, no one knew who I was, but it was just kind of a nice feeling. And then as the night wore on, there's another award that they do, like a separate category. They tell you, but they don't tell you. It's because Parma, they're known for prosciutto di Parma, Parmigiano Reggiano, that's the region that it comes from. And
Hmm.
so they do kind of like a smaller award for the best use of Parmigiano Reggiano. And so if you use it on your pizza, you kind of get pushed into this secondary category. Well, I ended up, I think I had won second place or third, or I think I had won the category as well. And so it's
Hmm.
been a long time now. I can't quite remember.
Yeah, but keep going. This is
Yeah,
fascinating.
but I had won that one as well. And so Tony, who's my mentor, he was there with me, of course, and he was more excited than anybody because he was kind of putting things together. And these are just like little hints that, okay, you've scored a lot higher than we thought. And because they don't tell you your score until afterwards. And so I had won the American award. I had won the Parmesan award. So we knew that, okay, I had done better than we thought. And then when it came for my category, well, I didn't hear my name for third place. I didn't hear my name for second place. And then all of a sudden I heard my name for first place. And at these competitions, most of these people that come to them, they've been coming to these competitions for years. Some people compete all their lives and never win. I mean,
Oh,
these competitions are huge. In Italy, they can be, the biggest categories can be upwards of 500 people. And your odds are so small that, yeah, you can go your whole life and never win. And so, everyone kind of knows everybody. And so when your name gets called, usually there's this giant uproar of people cheering and people clapping, and usually your team is, having, it's this loud uproar, and everyone's standing and shouting, and it's a cool feeling. It's like that true, you won something, you're going up on a podium, that like quintessential feeling that you want, or that's like that cinematic moment,
yeah.
and you want that, and you see it, and it's cool. But then when they called my name, well, first the presenter had kind of said that the winner was going to be a male, because in Italian the word for winner can be male or female depending on who it's talking about. And
Right.
so
Hmm.
the announcer had presented it as a male, and then had to go back and go, actually no, it's a female, and then said my name. And so me knowing what he was saying, I knew I had won before anybody else had. And it was kind of like this, excuse my language, but holy crap moment. Like, oh, I really did it. And of course, when they called my name and it came time for like my people to cheer, well, no one knew who I was outside of the handful of people that were there. Cause I was 23 at the time, 23 or 24. So I was super young. I had no clue. And I didn't even think we had 10 people there, 10 Americans that knew me. And so
Wow.
in this giant auditorium, where every time they announce a winner, it's this giant uproar. It was 10 people, and so cheering for my name. So it was a big moment for me, and it's something that I'll never forget. But it definitely kind of showed the difference of like, oh, this is someone that we have no clue who it is, for one, because it's the first time she's ever been here. So no one knew my name. And it was an American and an American female. And after, a couple years go by, I realized that the two other people that had won, one is consistently a judge.
Oh,
So
okay.
in years past that I've gone, he's always a judge. So, and then the second person, he's won, I can't even tell you how many competitions this man has won. He's been competing for so long, and he's just this great of a pizza maker. And I had managed to beat both of them the first time out. And so they, there's some pictures of them, looking up at me on the podium, and you could tell that there was a sense of pride for them as well, as like, oh wow, this girl did it. Like, this girl beat us. Like, this girl won.
Oh,
Um,
nice. Okay.
but at the same time, it was very much a, who the hell is this? Like, who is this person? So it was a surprise all around, but one I'll never forget for sure.
Right. And it sounds like this provided motive to go back again and say, okay, this time, this is one is for trial, two is to, I don't know, you can fill in the blank, but, and then you went back and won a third time. So,
Yeah, for me, I mean, I love competition. I'm an extremely competitive person. Like, I'm going to compete with you whether even you realize it or not. And it's something that helps push me. It helps drive me, and make challenges me to be better. And so I love competition. I'll always compete if it's available to me. But yeah, in the beginning it was, because my boss is a very well-known person in this industry. He's huge. And so that's a blessing and sometimes a curse. And for me in the beginning, until I had figured out who I was as a pizza maker, until I figured out my role in this industry, who I was as a person. I was so young at the time that I hadn't really developed who I was as a person yet. And so I had just come out of college. I was making pizza in San Francisco. I had moved to San Francisco, and I was just so young at the time. I hadn't really solidified as an adult yet. And so for me, it was a huge win and an incredible win. I didn't really understand the magnitude of it at the time because it was the first time I'd ever done it, whereas Tony had been competing for years and had never won first place at this competition. And
oh
so
gosh.
it didn't sink in until quite a bit later as to, oh, this is a really big deal. Like, this wasn't just, any small thing. And so, but for me, it was also, I needed to prove to myself that it wasn't a fluke. It wasn't just by happenstance, that it wasn't just luck. And
Yeah.
as well as, I wanted to make sure that it didn't have anything to do with Tony, that, me needing to be myself and my own person. So I needed to prove that it wasn't a fluke. And so, which is what pushed me to do the next competition the next year. And that one kind of confirmed, like, okay, this is another competition. It's in the United States now. It's a completely different set of people. It's a completely different type of pizza. Like, everything had changed. And when I had won, it kind of confirmed, like, okay, I think I know what I'm doing. Like, I
Yeah.
think you could
Yeah.
say confidently that I'm good at what I'm doing.
Yeah. You've arrived. And
Yeah.
so that our listeners know, you're speaking about Tony Gemiani.
Yes,
Right.
that's correct.
Uh, so you mentioned a few things you liked about competing. Are you also fueled by the number of competitors? Because I think in my research, you are in categories that can number up to 600 contestants. Is that true?
Yeah. You normally don't know how many people are in the category before you go. So it's not something that you think about. You just know, especially in the competitions in Italy and abroad, the categories are just a lot bigger because there's
Ah,
just so many more people that do it. And so it's not something that you're actively thinking about in the beginning. I mean, it's something that I think about in the sense of, don't think about winning. Don't think about the prospect of winning. Just go in and make the best pizza you can. Because if you start thinking about the numbers, then usually that's what, it starts to affect your ego and your confidence. And because your odds are very small, 1 in 600 is
Yeah.
not exactly a confidence boosting number.
Right. Right. And so you've taken that category of pan style pizza and run with it. What's the difference between pan style pizza and deep dish pizza?
Well, when I think about it here in the US, pan style pizza it can be a number of different things. There's a number of different types of pan pizza that come out of the US, but deep dish specifically to me is Chicago deep dish.
Oh,
And so when people say deep dish, it conjures a very specific image in my brain as to what this pizza is going to look like. It's going to look like a pie in the sense that there's a crust that is the perimeter and the border, and it's a high wall, but the filling is going to be in the middle. It's going to like lay like an apple pie kind of a thing. And so, and it's going to cut kind of like a cake, and you're going to take a slice out, and it's just going to be large, lots of filling, lots of sauce, lots of cheese, and
hmm.
it doesn't eat like a normal pizza because you don't normally pick it up with your hands and fold it and eat it. Normally this is kind of a fork and knife pizza, which isn't a
Oh,
bad thing. It's a very specific image in my head. And so whereas pan pizza to me is normally dough on the bottom. It doesn't usually creep up the sides, or at least we don't build it up on the sides like we do a deep dish. And then the toppings are laid on top. It doesn't like encase the toppings. So pan pizza can be anything from a Sicilian. It can be, even though there is another type of pan pizza that does come out of Chicago, that's not technically called a deep dish. There's Detroit style pizza. There's Greek pizza. There's actually a lot of different types of pan pizza out there.
mhm.
But deep dish specifically, it conjures the image from Chicago.
Okay. So we've got the origin of deep dish pizza. So what's the origin of pan style pizza?
Well, that depends on the type of pan pizza you're talking about. I mean, a lot of times, some pans have evolved out of bakeries. Some pans have evolved just out of the home. So I think, when you look at history and you look at the evolution of food, a lot of times these things are built out of necessity. Like Detroit style pizza, for instance, that was created out of the like automotive era of Detroit, and when all the automobile industry was booming, and so everyone there was a member of the automotive industry, whether they were a mechanic or they were building cars or whatever the case may be. And so the pans associated with Detroit style pizza traditionally were the pans that workers would use to like hold and clean their tools. And
Oh,
so it was a pan that everyone had probably at home or in their shop or somewhere. And so it was one of these, well, we have it, why can't we use it for this? And so that's kind of where it came from. It was a out of a necessity. It wasn't exactly like a predetermined thing. It was just we want to do this, but we need a pan. Well, there's a pan, let's use it. So
right.
it wasn't like a we want to make a specific pan because of this. It was just everything is usually out of necessity. Um, so depending on the times.
Yeah, seems like a really resourceful use of a pan
Yeah.
from the automotive industry. So we've already established you know pizza, and a really good pizza has just a few simple ingredients. How come there's so much bad pizza out there in the world?
Well, I think pizza has come a long way, at least in the almost 20 years that I've been doing it. It's been crazy to watch the evolution of pizza in my lifetime because it has drastically gotten better. I mean, it's amazing how far the pizza industry has come, but I think a lot of it has to do with the amount of information that's out there, technology, you can just whip out a phone and Google it now. Whereas back then it was a lot of secrets. It was also just, it took longer to communicate, things like that. And so, I'm sorry, remind me what the question was.
Oh yeah, sure. I'll ask it again. I'll ask it again. Yeah, the question is, really good pizza has just a few simple ingredients. How come there's so much bad pizza out there?
But even though there's a lot of information, I think a lot of people cut corners. They want to take shortcuts. I think a lot of people, especially nowadays, they look at pizza as profit. They look at it as money because the margins are high, even though the labor is even higher.
Hmm.
And they see it as this profit center because pizza is one of those food items that will never die. It is so ingrained in our culture, even though it's not the same as Italian pizza culture, but at least here in the US, it's ingrained in our culture in a very different way, meaning everybody eats it. They might have a different attachment to it than the Italians do. And this goes for all over the world. Like pizza is literally all over the world and it's a part of every culture. And so in one way, shape, or form. And so it's one of those food items that I think will never die. And but at the same time, people see that and they go, "Oh, pizza's profitable. I'm going to do it." And so they cut corners, or because to do something right in the food industry is very expensive. It's not easy to do because ingredients can be expensive whether you're importing them or not. Labor is extremely high, at least
Hmm.
here in the US.
Yeah.
So it can be very hard, not to mention the cost of doing business. Like just keeping the lights on can be expensive. So it all just depends. And I think a lot of people get into it and they want to cut corners, whether they want to cheapen their ingredients or they are cutting costs on labor. They're trying to quicken cook times for the sake of turning out more food. So it just, I think a lot of times people are just trying to cut corners and they don't realize that by cutting corners, you're diminishing the quality of the product.
Right, right. So you had found a great mentor in Tony Gemiani, who you also, as I understand, you also ran his restaurant for a while. Is that correct?
Yeah, while I was working in San Francisco, I mean, I ran the back of house, and obviously there was a general manager as well, and so pretty much I ran the back of house for I want to say 8 or 9 years, and over the course of those 8 or 9 years, it kind of Tony's kind of his restaurant turned into kind of the mecca that it's become here in San Francisco, and we started with Tony. The restaurant had already been open for almost 2 years by the time I got there.
Hmm.
But over the course of my time, we had gone from, I want to say it was like four styles of pizza, 4 or 5 styles of pizza. But by the time I had left, there were 14 styles of
Ooh,
pizza.
wow.
So it was, my tenure there was a huge like building era. It was, that was kind of the beauty of why one of the many reasons as to why my relationship with Tony worked so well because he at that period of time he was in a constant phase of learning,
Hmm.
which meant
Okay.
I was in a constant phase of learning. That always really appealed to me. And yeah, of course it was the daily grind of and hardship of working in a restaurant day after day after day, but it also meant that I was learning all of these different styles of pizza. I was learning the science and the chemistry, and then also learning how to become a teacher, how to become a writer, how to become a public speaker, how to do all of these
Wow.
other
Yeah.
things that Tony is so well known for. And he really is like a jack of all trades because he's a phenomenal pizza maker, but he's also so good at so many other things. And so being around that meant that I was learning and absorbing and yeah, having fun at the same time and traveling and doing all these cool things, but it meant that I was always learning something. That to me was like the best thing ever for my brain and the way that I knew I never wanted to work in an office. Let's just say that. And
Right.
I needed something that was going to be able to kind of keep up with my can't sit still mentality.
And it seems like you've got a good solution to that. You have one restaurant, Pizzeria de Laura in
Mhm.
Berkeley, as we mentioned, and with expansion on the horizon, as we understand. I really want to warn the listeners out there: do not look at the Instagram account for Pizzeria de Laura if you're hungry. Don't do it because you will be starving. It's incredible. The photos, it's really really yeah, mouth watering. What are some of your best sellers at the pizzeria?
Well, so I modeled my pizzeria predominantly around the pan styles because the pan styles, they're so different, but they're a style that I always go back to. I love the pan styles and all the differences that you can create. And so I featured three different pan styles: Sicilian, Grandma, and Detroit. And then I also feature like a classic round pie that we call it in New York, but obviously it's not the exact duplication of what you find in New York. But
Hmm.
it yeah, the restaurant, I wanted to build it so that it offered something different. And I was actually very pleasantly surprised that the people love the thick pan pizza. And so I was pleasantly surprised that they actually really love the Sicilian focaccia like crust. And then, of course, they love the award winner La Regina, the soppressata, arugula, prosciutto, parmesan. Like, that's a classic for them. But then they've also really kind of latched on to, there's one that I do that's a double pepperoni, burrata, fermented honey,
Hmm.
basil, parmesan. It kind of hits all the things. It's meaty, but then you get the burrata, which kind of tones it down and it's cooling, and then the honey, which offsets the spice, and it's just a very complimentary pizza. And then in my area, we actually have a very large vegan and vegetarian population, so
Hmm.
I actually probably sell as much vegetarian veggie pizzas than I do meat based pizzas.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so there's actually a wide variety of what people like. And so I kind of like that. I like that people are open minded and that they pretty much will eat anything.
Yeah, what does fermented honey taste like?
Well, we do a garlic fermented honey, and so, hot honey right now is all the rage. And
Hmm.
hot honey is amazing, but of course, I didn't want to be like everybody else. And so that meant that we were going to do something different. And so hot honey is usually has a combination of chilies in it or something spicy like a chili powder of some sort that's blended into it. And when you go the garlic fermented route, you get a very different kind of sweet heat out of it because garlic gives you a very different type of spice component. And so
Hmm.
it's nice because you get kind of a hint of heat from it and you get the spice, but it's not the same as like a chili pepper kind of
Hmm.
sometimes kick you in the face hot. And
Yeah.
but you still get the floral from the honey, and that's the thing that I like is that it doesn't mask the notes of the honey. And especially if we're using local honey, it's very aromatic, it's very flavorful. You get a very distinct floral aroma from it, and the garlic doesn't overshadow it. It just kind of complements it. And the other thing that I like about it is that when you ferment honey, it actually loosens it. So instead of it
Oh.
staying super thick, it actually thins it out a little bit, which is nice because it's not a super super concentrated sweet. It means that when you're drizzling it over top, you get sweetness, but it's not as concentrated as honey out of a jar.
Wow. Interesting.
And it's super easy to do. So in essence, all you're doing is you're putting a layer of garlic in a jar or a container, and then you're just going to top it with honey,
Oh,
and then you let it ferment for about a month, if not a little bit more. And you'll see it in action, like the fermentation will happen right before your very eyes. But I mean, the only thing that you got to really keep in consideration is you got to make sure that the environment is very clean when you're
sure.
doing it. That's the only thing. But yeah, it doesn't require anything super specific.
Just time.
Just time.
Wow. So your Scoolinary course is called American Style Pizza. Is that a controversial term?
I would say so. I would say, yeah, calling it American style pizza is because, and it's funny because even after the fact, I was thinking about it like, I'm sure someone with an opinion is going to say something, but
Yeah. And
because
have
they
they?
always, because they always do.
Sure.
No, no one said anything yet, but I'm sure once it's out there in the world and it's for a little bit of time, I'm sure someone will. But I call it American pizza because these are my takes on these styles of pizza. Of course, Sicilian pizza, it's called Sicilian pizza. Like it's evolved from sfincione and bakery style pizza that has come out of Sicily. So like, of course, if you really want to be nitpicky, no, these are not all strictly American styles of pizza, but they are my takes, my evolutions of these styles of pizza. So, and I'm an American, and these are things that I've evolved and created and tweaked here in the US, and it's what I know as American Sicilian pizza. And so I know someone will say something, but at the end of the day, it's still delicious.
That's really what we're aiming for, right?
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
we don't need to get too caught up on the name.
Yeah. So, what's a good pizza to start with from your course?
I mean, it starts from the foundation. Dough can be a little bit intimidating, but at the same time, once you learn to not be afraid of it and like, oh, it's sticky or oh, it's tacky or oh, it's not coming together, like once you learn that you just got to get your hands dirty. You just got to stick your hands in there, knead the dough, don't be afraid of it. It starts from the foundation and then it builds from there. Of course, you want to use great ingredients, whether that they're locally sourced or not, or whether it's imported. You want to use great ingredients. You don't want to break the bank if you don't have to. But, using great quality all around is always going to give you a great end product. If you start with good quality, you're going to end with good quality, unless you burn it. But if you start with low quality, it's not going to get better.
Right.
You're going to get worse. So you might
Well,
as well start at the top.
yeah, I have a question about oven temperature because my local pizzeria here is run by couple brothers from Torino, and the pizza is fantastic. But I noticed that their oven is at 400 Celsius, and I can't remember what that is in Fahrenheit. That's a really hot, hot, hot oven. Is that absolutely necessary?
Not necessarily, because that they're making what the world mostly knows as Neapolitan pizza.
Yep.
That's in Fahrenheit, you're looking at something that's closer to 900 degrees. And so Neapolitan pizza is really hard to do at home because I don't know what home oven gets that hot. And so, the great thing about pizza is that it can be tweaked once you really start to learn some of the basic, even just the basic chemistry of what ingredients do what.
Huh. Okay.
You learn how to tweak and manipulate your doughs and cook times and how to even tweak your ovens to suit what you're doing to make sure that it comes out the way you want it every time. So 900 degrees is not really feasible for most home users. It's not even feasible for most commercial or even just restaurant owners unless you have that specific oven. So, you know, as you get more into it, you can make pizza on a grill outside. You can make pizza almost anywhere, and depending on, once you learn your equipment and you learn your ingredients. And that's the beauty of pizza. So, but Neapolitan is very specific. And so kind of once you're cooking at that high of a temperature, it's kind of the only thing you can really cook at that hot of a temperature.
Huh.
But I love Neapolitan pizza. I think it's also just a beautiful style in terms of the technique. There's a fluidity to it. There's like a gracefulness to it in terms of the technique of working the oven and stretching the pizza. It's a very cool style of pizza, but it can be one of the harder ones to do.
And that is why they are packed and reservations are required all the
Yeah.
time. It does all the time.
Yeah.
So you started out as a focaccia pop-up across the bay there in San Francisco. How did you transform your pop-up into Pizzeria da Laura?
Well, the pop-up was because of COVID, and it was one of those, I was working, but we weren't really working full steam yet, and so I just needed something to challenge myself with, and I was making focaccia for my friends, and I was just tweaking recipes and just kind of trying to really nail down what it was that I was looking for, which meant that my friends were eating a lot of focaccia. And it got to a point where, one of my good friends was pretty much told me, "Hey, you need to sell this. Like, this is really good. And I think it's time." And she had helped, facilitate the market that we were in. And, she really helped push me out of my comfort zone. And, it so happened to be at a market that was specifically meant for female small businesses.
Hmm.
So it was all females, and it was a pop-up market where we just popped up out front of a restaurant in the neighborhood that I worked, once a month, I want to say, or once a week. It wasn't like an everyday type of thing, but it allowed me to kind of put myself out there in a way that I had never done before. And it was, testing the waters of selling a product, selling my name, branding, all that kind of stuff. And it put me out there in a way that I never had before. And so it was kind of a test the waters of entrepreneurship for me. And it got really good feedback, and we pretty much sold out every single time. And, it just kind of assured me that, because I wasn't even sure up until that point of, did I want to open a restaurant? Do I not want to open a restaurant? Well, if I'm not opening a restaurant, then what am I doing? All of these things, I was just at that point in my career where I kind of had to make a decision, and COVID kind of afforded me that time. Like everybody else, there was that kind of, the world stopped for a minute. And so it
Yeah.
allowed me a period of time to really think about what I was doing and my career. And I had told myself, okay, I think I'm going to do it. And if I don't do it now, it might be the one thing I regret. And, I had to kind of assure myself that, it doesn't have to be forever. I
Oh,
want to do it, but the restaurant, no one ever goes into it thinking, oh, I'll do this for 5 years and then I'll move on to something else. No, I don't think anyone ever really thinks that when they open a restaurant. Of course, they want it to live on forever. And of course, I do want it to live on forever. But watching my mentor over the years, watching Tony, he reminded me that just because you open a restaurant, yeah, you need to devote a certain amount of your time and energy to make sure that it's successful and that it's great and that it's going to last. But it doesn't have to mean that this is the only thing you ever do
hmm.
for the rest of
Yeah.
your life. Like, it is possible to still do other things and own a restaurant. Granted, you got to work really hard for it, but
Yeah.
the possibility is there. And so, if anyone was going to learn that lesson, it was going to be me, having worked with him for so long. And I took that to heart, over the course of my time to think and stuff. And so, and I chose to do it. And I also, chose to do it with all the information I had learned from everyone around me. I was going to do it right out the gate, which meant that it was going to be really hard, because to do things right sometimes is more costly, more time consuming, just more of everything. But the restaurant's been open for over a year now, and we're doing great. And I cannot complain. There's ups and downs with every restaurant opening. It's hard. It's not easy. It's one of the toughest things you'll ever do, to be very honest, but it's worth it. To me,
Yeah.
it's worth it. And it's hard, and I'm tired a lot of the time, but
Yeah.
it's worth it. And I'm still at that age. I'm young. I got the energy to burn. So why not build something with it?
Right. And it sounds like you invested up front when you open, because diners can be brutal, and they don't often give you that second chance to make a first impression. So you better get it right the first time, right?
Yeah, restaurant, it's hard. Restaurant
Yeah.
food is such a personal thing, and everyone has an opinion.
Yeah.
And they are not afraid to tell you. And that was hard to do in the beginning. I had to learn that I can't be the person that looks at the reviews. I can't be the person. It's too personal to me, because someone telling me that they didn't like their experience, or they didn't like the pizza, or it needed this and it needed that. It's just it's too personal. It's like a slap in the face every time. And so I've learned, okay, I need someone else to help me with this. And then if it really, really requires my attention, obviously I will jump in. But if it's something that doesn't, I don't have to look at every single one of them, because it hurts and people are ruthless.
Right. And that, I think that kind of feedback is exacerbated by the digital communication that we have at our fingertips at every second of the day.
Yeah, I mean, there's usefulness that comes from some reviews. If it's something that the restaurant really just doesn't know about and needs to fix, like I am all for apologizing for something that went wrong, or trying to make up or rectify a problem or an issue. I have no problem admitting fault. But if it's if you're telling me that something's wrong with the restaurant because of your opinion, and it's just something that you don't like, then I'm just going to keep moving, because I don't have time to change the restaurant for everyone's opinion. Like
Sure.
it's like, I built this restaurant, yes, to feed the public, because it's something that I really enjoy doing, but I also built this restaurant for myself. So it's based on my opinion, not yours.
Right. And that kind of trying to please everyone will ultimately make you drive you nuts.
Yeah, I think some people take Yelp and all of these platforms for reviews a little bit far. And I think people, especially when it comes to independent restaurants, I mean,
Hmm.
independent restaurants, a restaurant is someone's livelihood. And it's also the livelihood of all of the employees. And to make a bad review based off of something that is so small and so tiny, or maybe it was your first time there and it's not a repeat experience, you don't know if that's how they normally do things. You don't know if that's just a fluke, or a one-off experience. And it can be really damaging, like extremely damaging. And that's why a lot of independent restaurants don't survive.
Hmm. Yeah.
And people don't understand the long-term effects of bad reviews because of an opinion. And that's where I think it goes too far. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, everyone's allowed to voice their opinion, but when it comes down to, now you're damaging a restaurant, and now you're actively trying to get people to not go to this restaurant, like that's where I draw the line.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've surrounded yourself with at least one good mentor, but probably many more. And the question I had is probably two answers in one. Who are your mentors, and would you recommend any of them for a future episode of this podcast?
Tony has definitely been my is my mentor. I mean, I was with him for about 18 years. I worked with him for about 18 years. But I take advice, I take note from everyone, because everyone's business, all my friends, all of their businesses are thriving in different ways. They excel. Yes, of course, they all excel at making pizza, in their way, but they're also great businessmen and businesswomen in their own rights, and they excel in different areas. And so, I'm fortunate that I can call anyone, or I can, send a message, an email, or I can reach out to so many people who I know that are great in so many different areas, and say, "Hey, can I talk to you for 10 minutes and just get their advice on certain things? What did you do? How did you do this? What was your thought process behind all that?" And they help. And so, there's a slew of different female pizza makers that I look up to, like Leah Skirdo in my area, Nicole Bean in Texas. There's Audrey Kelly in Colorado. I mean, there's so many amazing pizza makers and in my area, and just within the US and outside of the US, that I'm fortunate that this community is as large and as welcoming as it is. And so, but yeah, I would recommend any single one of them. I mean, I have a laundry list, so it all depends on on how long you want to be on here.
Well, you've given four great suggestions, so I really appreciate that. And I also want to thank you very much for joining us for coffee today. I know it's really early where you are, so thanks very much for rising and shining with us. It's been interesting, and of course, I could keep on going with questions all day long, but I don't think you have that kind of time. So appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Have a great one.
If you like this episode, don't miss an episode by becoming a member. We're waiting for you each week with more guests. We're on all podcast platforms. Just search for Coffee with Scoolinary. We're also waiting for you at our website and on our social networks, where you can get to know all our courses and teachers.